In repose and shirtless, Michael reclined holding a book, his other arm stretched across an ivory bolster. The muscular contours and valleys of his body emphasized his strength, reminding her once again that he was a virile, masculine creature who could break her without much effort. As she struggled with her thoughts, another crossroad lay before her. Whether she chose the right path and offered to release him from his marriage proposal, or selfishly clung to the life he promised, was a deadly battle, one her mind and heart fought with vigour. To free Michael from his promise could very well result in her heart not surviving the night, but it was the right decision. Slowly, her laboured breath grew less frantic, while her heartbeat skipped in fits and starts, urging her to join him. He smiled briefly, the one he used when he was about to tease her. The sight so familiar and comforting, it reminded her of home and the sun on a summer day. When she caught his gaze, his eyes glimmered with a sensual magnetism that compelled her forward, but riveted to the spot, she lacked the ability to move toward him. "Sweetheart, what is it?" His brows drew together in a line. "I can't." She struggled for the right phrase, for the correct words, for anything. "Marry, unless you understand all the ramifications of what I discovered today in Chelmsford." "You can." Michael threw aside the velvet spread and rose from the opposite side of the bed. He turned toward the wall with his backside facing her, leaving March with a clear view of his naked body. The muscles in his back rippled with his movements. Unable to tear her gaze away, she studied every line of his form as her heart hammered against her ribs. Wide shoulders narrowed into strong hips. His perfectly formed buttocks tensed as he reached for his banyan. The air around her grew heavy and locked her into place. There was no need for the forced captivity. She could watch him all day. With wide eyes, she consumed him with her gaze. Michael was perfect. All 6 sisters stared at her. It was Neela who finally spoke.
"Kira, I think you should probably go," she said. "Shane doesn't want to see you."
But then Hannah interrupted.
"Girls, we should give her a chance, don't you think?"
There was a moment where the sisters exchanged glances with each other, biting their lips in deliberation. Then, at last, they relented.
"I suppose it's up to him," Aileen said with a shrug.
Hannah looked thrilled as she ran off to fetch Shane. Kira felt her stomach twist into knots at the thought of seeing him again after how badly it had ended between them. Then suddenly, he was there, standing at the top of the stairs. Seeing him again sent bolts of desire racing through Kira. Her mouth became dry, her palms sweaty, and she could feel her heart beating more rapidly in her chest, thudding against her rib cage. Shane surveyed the scene below him, looking down at the huddle of women watching him expectantly from the bottom of the staircase. Kira desperately wished she didn't have an audience for this moment. It was awkward enough as it was. Shane began to walk slowly down the stairs toward her. "What are you doing here, Kira?" Kira looked from one sister's face to the next. They were all watching her, like hawks. "Can we go somewhere private to talk?" she asked. Shane reached the bottom step and folded his arms. "I don't think there's anything left to say. I think you covered everything in your article." "Oh, there is," Kira exclaimed. "Trust me, there is so much to say." Shane paused and took a deep breath. "Fine. Girls, could you leave us be?" The sisters looked at each other, visibly disappointed to be being shut out of the drama. But they followed his command and filed out of the corridor into the kitchen, shutting the door softly behind them. Though they'd left, Kira fully expected them to be crowding together on the other side of the door in order to listen in on the conversation, so it wasn't like they'd be missing out entirely. With the kitchen door shut, Kira turned her full attention to Shane. He raised an eyebrow. Well? Kira swallowed her nerves. I'm not using the article. It's not me. It's not what I think. I was trying to impress the wrong person. But I know what's important now. Shane folded his arms. Which is? Kira let the words tumble out of her. The truth, the sheer insanity of her feelings for him. You, Shane, she stammered. You and me. Everything's changed since I came here. I was just too stubborn to realise. I didn't want it to be true. Didn't want what to be true? The fact I was falling in love with you. That's a sign if ever I saw one, the clerk said with a smile. Emily gazed adoringly at the ring. It was perfect. More than perfect. It was like discovering something she'd never even realised she wanted. I have to ask, Emily said, squinting a little in anticipation. How much is it? The clerk smiled a wry smile. Why don't we let your fiancé-to-be worry about the finances, she said, nodding toward the door. Emily looked over her shoulder just in time to hear the bell tinkle and see Daniel enter. Emily swirled fully, a large grin on her face, her stomach swirling with joy, and held up her hand. The ring gleamed on her ring finger, catching the light and glittering. I found it, she squealed with excitement. I found the perfect ring. For a microsecond, nothing happened. Then Emily noticed the change in Daniel's expression. A sudden realisation, as though something had suddenly dawned on him. She saw concern flash across his eyes. Then the moment of realisation hit her too, like a ton of bricks, a lead weight. She'd misunderstood this whole thing.